Are you wondering how you can learn more about food? Well, you're in the right place. This is the Chakula Podcast, brought to you by the Root to Food Initiative, a show that celebrates authentic Kenyan dishes and serves you hot conversations about food in Kenya from an economic, social, and political lens. Sema nasi kwenye social media at Root to Food on Instagram, at Root to Food on Twitter, and Root to Food on Facebook. And now, here's your host, Felistas Mwalia.
Hello there and welcome to the Chakula Podcast. It has been 10 years since the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution. One of the most fundamental features of the Constitution is devolution. To many Kenyans, this means better service delivery, more involvement of people in governance, the government closer to the people. This is why I want us to have this conversation today on devolution and how it impacts agriculture. Agriculture is one of the functions that have been devolved in the 2010 Constitution. It is an important part of the economy as it is responsible for more than 30% GDP and it employs over 60% of the workforce, besides keeping our rich farming and food history and culture. I'll be speaking to someone who has been covering stories on issues around food for a while. She also got an FAO award for her coverage on food security. Karibu sana Zeynab.
Thank you.
Thank you for creating time. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm happy to be here.
You've been working to bring food security issues to life. What can you say about the status of food and security and agriculture development in the country?
That's actually a very controversial question in the industry. You'll get different answers depending on who you speak to. The generally accepted statement is that the country is significantly food insecure. Mm-hmm. However, I don't ascribe to that school of thought. Mm-hmm. Having covered agriculture in the time that I have and having traveled across this country, I've come to realize that our challenge is not necessarily in production. Our challenge is not necessarily in the availability of food. Our challenge is in distribution of that food. Because never will you find a situation whereby the whole country has suffered a drought or the whole country doesn't have food. Mm-hmm. You'll always find there's food in North Rift or South Rift when there's no food in the North.
Yeah.
There's North Rift and South Rift will have surplus. Areas of Turkana has no food. Yeah. So the challenge is not that there's no food.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There is food. The problem is how do you get that food out of Eldoret or out of Bomet and move it to Turkana?
I believe what you're trying to say is that the problem is in production rather than access.
No, not production. Uh-huh. The problem is in access.
Accessibility, availability.
Accessibility is where the greatest challenge is. Accessibility is how do you move that food from one area to another, and how do you as a citizen of that specific area move from your house to where that food is. I think counties have tried. What I've seen many counties do is to literally map out their ecological zones and their specific needs. There's some counties who are looking at agriculture from a perspective of the impact climate change has had in their counties. And so when they plan for agriculture, they plan with climate change in mind. And so you'll find that in their budgets, they're including climate adaptation as a function of agriculture. You'll not see that with every county. This is something you'll see mostly with the arid and semi-arid counties. Mm-hmm. They have a clear plan as part of their... Makueni County was actually the first county to set aside 2% for climate proofing its systems so that agriculture can work.
Maybe you can explain more on that issue, on that climate proofing system?
Yes.
Yeah.
Climate change impacts this country greatly. Mm-hmm. We are not key contributors to climate change,
but our food systems
has suffered.
Yeah.
Yes,
and it's also a major contributor to climate change.
Yes, and actually just this past week, Kenya Met has released a report, the very, very, very first report ever for Kenya Met to do. It's called the State of Climate in Kenya 2019. And if you look at that report, its key focus is on 2019, but it also looks at data going back to 1961. And from the data, it shows that Kenya's nights mostly are consistently getting warmer while the rains are shrinking. So if you look at areas like Eldoret and Kitale, in those two areas, they currently grow maize, a lot of maize. And maize has specific needs of how much water, how much temperature, how much what.
Yeah.
But in the Kenya Met data, Eldoret and Kitale are receiving increasingly more rain. What that means is that pretty soon, we may have to rethink maize in Kitale and Eldoret and probably move it to a place that is not getting so much precipitation. Because when you put too much precipitation in the maize, it will rot. You've seen last year in Eldoret, when it rained during the short rain season, it rained excessively. They were not able to get that crop out of the field. That time of the year should not be raining. It should be dry so that they can get the crop out of the field. So this is data that is crucial for the arid and semi-arid lands because they know in their climate, the temperatures are rising. Actually, Kenya Met has put Lodwar on a watch list for extreme temperature, reporting consistently over 38 degrees, which puts them in the range of a heat wave, puts the locals at risk of heat waves. So those arid counties know they need to produce food for their people. But your climate is too hot to be able to sustain the crop. Maize, we are all obsessed with maize. That is the food the people want to grow. It's too hot for you to grow the maize. What do? So they are putting in their budgets, Makueni, I think they did 2%. All of those counties, they came up with a climate adaptation plan. Each of those, I think there are 12 counties, came up with a climate adaptation plan. Those climate adaptation committees are made up of someone from each ministry, each county ministry, so that if it's education sector, you say, what are the climate needs in your, how is climate change impacting education?
Okay, interesting.
Agriculture, how is climate change impacting agriculture? Transport. Then you take all these challenges, you put them together and see what are the climate needs of the county. Agriculture always comes up on top because people need to eat.
But
so more of that money, of that climate adaptation money, goes into climate change. So counties, many of these counties, that is where their focus is, how to climate proof themselves in order to produce. But where they are doing better than the national government, in my opinion, is in funding. The national government will do an average of 3-point-something funding to agriculture.
I think it's 3.5.
Yes, but the counties will take that money and allocate at least 77% of their county budget to agriculture. At least 7%. That's more than 3.2 that the national government has allocated to agriculture. Although it is still lower than the Maputo Declaration, it is a good step towards actually fixing problems in the industry.
So basically, you rate it as high, or is it
I give it above average.
Wow. Maybe to take you back, I think where the county governments are actually going wrong, instead of setting funds aside for climate adaptation, they should first rethink of the current farming systems they have. Because at the moment, our current food systems are really the contributing factors to climate change.
You can't separate the two.
You can't separate the two.
Because the climate information is what will enable you to rethink your farming system. So that when you're rethinking your farming system, you're doing so in light of your changing climate.
So how much priority is given to agriculture and food security considering the trends in allocation to this sector? As you have talked about, the 3.5% allocation.
I would say that more counties are giving it more weight than others. I'd like to single out Makueni because it's one of the counties that actually provide data. Some other counties, you may look for data forever and you'll never get data.
Can you give us an example of some of the counties that really don't?
In other counties, actually, for you to get data, you have to go through a development partner. Like this development partner that is doing a project in that county, that development partner has developed the data. But if you go to the county government and tell them, I'd like information about the 1, 2, 3 things, you may not necessarily get it. So in my opinion, I think the arid counties are giving more priority to climate change because they're desperate to get themselves off the list of food aid. Makueni, for instance, has a plan. They say that they have a plan to get themselves off that list within 3 years because parts of Makueni are consistently in need of food aid. Consistently. So the county needs them to figure out, how do I get these people to produce their own food so that they don't have to keep coming to me or to someone else begging for that food. Nairobi, I don't know if you can ever find any data on on the status of food security in Nairobi because Nairobi is not, you wouldn't really say agriculture in Nairobi. Although the county keeps saying we have a plan for urban farming. I don't think I've seen anything concrete yet. You'll just find individuals who are doing to small kitchen gardens on their balconies, someone calling you up and saying, oh, hey, I can hook you up. You want a vegetable garden in your backyard? I can hook you up with that. But the county itself, no. So I think that varies from county to county.
Okay. So aside from this, what is the main challenge that you think needs to be addressed that is within the reach of counties?
Something that is within the reach of counties. Accessibility of food. Accessibility of food. Accessibility means as a farmer, I've got my crop, it's on the field. My plot is probably 100 or maybe 50 kilometers from the barabara ya lami. How am I going to get that food from my farm to to the market so that you can get it. That link there.
The linkage
You
between.
will always find a lot of these farmers struggling with poor states of roads. Poor. Last week, Nyandarua County was trending on social media. Last week and the week before, I think. It's been raining heavily in Nyandarua, and people have been taking pictures of how transport is a nightmare now that it's raining, because the roads are in terrible condition. Now imagine you're a farmer, you have potato in the field. Potato is a highly perishable product. You need to get it from the farm to the market in the shortest time possible, and you have to get stuck in that kind of bad road. And then we've also done, in the media, we've done so many stories of people getting stuck for days on the road. With a perishable product, that's not possible. That's one of the quick wins counties can quickly do. Fix the access roads for the farmers. It doesn't have to be barabara ya lami. It just needs to be a good quality road that will not have me stuck on the road when I'm moving my product from the farm to the market, so that you then can come and find it in the market. Because if I am unable to get it to the market, then you can't access it. You as the consumer can't access it. And that means there'll be some kind of shortage. And the ripple effect is the little food that is available, the prices will start to skyrocket. It's always connected. Every time you see prices of food skyrocketing, go back, follow the links. What happened? Was there a missing connection between the farmer and the market? Was there a missing, did the farmer not produce accurately? A lot of times you'll find the challenge is actually transport. That accessibility is where you'll find the problem is. And that's a quick win that counties can do.
Can we also say that the multiple SES is also a challenge to...
Yes and no, because for CES, I think the national government is intervening with matters of CES. The counties will always tell you that they are required, the money they are given by the national government is not enough. So they have to raise their own source revenue. And their own source revenue is usually raised in the form of taxes. And one of those taxes is CES. Yes.
Wow.
So they say that's something they can't do anything about.
Zeynab, you've talked about post-harvest loss being one of the major challenges that farmers face. What are the impacts of this to food security?
Actually, post-harvest is a very big problem that even the national government is struggling with. How much is lost? It's always estimated at around 30% of all the crop being lost post-harvest. But with other crops like mangoes, the losses are higher, around 60%. So if you have a tree that will give you about 200 mangoes, the instances where you'll find at least 120 of them going to waste. And the reasons for post-harvest, finding the reasons of post-harvest is one step towards fixing the problem. For the mango value chain, the reason you had farmers losing 120 mangoes out of a whole tree of 200 was the pricing. For many of the farmers, again Makueni, for many of those farmers were selling the mangoes at 3 shillings. 3 shillings. That was because of lack of cold storage. You have no choice but to sell it in the farm. So as a buyer, I will come to your farm and tell you, si unataka kuuza maembe, mimi niko na shilingi 3, usipochukua shilingi 3 maembe yako itaoza. You're desperate. You need that money. So you take it, and I take your mango at 3 shillings. I come to Nairobi, I sell it at 30 bob.
What?
I sell the same mango at 30 bob that I took from you at 3 shillings. You had no choice but to give it to me for 3 shillings. Because if you don't, you will lose all those mangoes in the field. So what we've seen is that for many of these such small-scale farmers, especially in the horticulture value chain and the vegetable value chain, they are being encouraged to come into groups. And some of these groups are being done in collaboration with universities. And as universities do more research, I know University of Nairobi is doing a lot of research on post-harvest. So through universities and development partners, they are coming into cooperatives and learning ways in which they can preserve the shelf life of these vegetables and these fruits so that they can have better bargaining power. Post-harvest loss of fruit is also impacted by how you harvest it and also how you store it in the house. For instance, a fruit that is ripe should not be kept with fruits that are not ripe. There are also some kinds of, you see the purple-fleshed passion fruits. Fruits, when they are ripe, they produce this gas called ethylene. Ethylene hastens the ripening of fruits. So if you take a fruit that naturally has ethylene, like the passion fruit, and then you put it in a basket with fruits that are not ripe, those unripe fruits will ripen faster than you intended.
Wow.
So I've actually been able to attend some of those classes with those university students when they're teaching farmers how to shorten. And I ended up learning a lot of things. So what the farmers were being taught is when you get the mango from the tree, separate them based on what stage of ripening are they at. And then you wash them and before you store them in the cold storage. Don't put them all together in one basket.
Okay.
And for vegetables also, they're being taught how to lengthen the shelf life of this, if you don't have a fridge, that is, by using something, there's this method they call blanching. Blanching is when you kind of boil but not boil. If it's, for example, skuma wiki, you've cut it up nicely, you have a pot of boiling water, you just dip the skuma in the boiling water and you put it in cold water and you dry it.
Oh.
It doesn't cook. It cooks but doesn't cook.
So after
then when
dries,
you dry, it still remains green. I think the hot water, I think, has some salt in it also to maintain the green color. So once you dry it, it dries so well and you can keep it for up to 2 years.
Wow, 2 years.
Yes, you can keep it for up to 2 years. Those are the kind of technologies that small-scale farmers are being taught so as to reduce their post-harvest
losses. You've talked about data at the county level. What's the state of integration of data into farming?
Actually, data, whether we like it or not, controls our life. Traditionally, when our forefathers, long before technology came in, they actually did use data, but they used it by looking at the sky, looking at how the clouds are moving, how the stars are, and they use that information to know whether it's time to plant or when will the rains come or if there's going to be a drought. They used that kind of data. Right now, technology is able to do that for us. We put satellites in the sky. The satellites tell us, oh, by the way, in this period, there's going to be, without having to look up ourselves.
Yeah.
The satellite has looked up for you, it has processed that data, it has given it to you. So since most of our farmers are very small scale, the kind of data they're using is very basic on the mobile phones, the kabambe phones, not the smartphones. They use very basic data on kabambe phones. Our young people are actually very tech savvy, so they are constantly coming up with apps and apps that can be used on whatever kind of phone that will able to give you whatever information you need. Calro has also done the same. There's also another group of scientists at JKUAT that is developing a climate atlas for Kenya. And that climate atlas is also, my goodness, the grim future we are facing. So the climate atlas, based on with JKUAT, combined with the Kenya Met Atlas, is telling the scientists that in the next few years, you need to move maize out of Eldoret and Kitale and move it to northern Kenya. In the next few years, dairy farming in Kiambu, it's going to be too warm to keep those Frisian animals. The Frisians are the black and white ones. Yes. In the next few, the temperatures in Kiambu are already too hot for Frisians. If you're reporting, Frisians need temperatures of 23 degrees and below. Kiambu is reporting above 23 degrees.
Wow.
Above 23 degrees Celsius. That's becoming too warm for Frisian animals.
I think I'll still emphasize on my point. We need to rethink our farming systems. What are the key cultural issues you can highlight around farming?
That's interesting.
At the county level?
Thing is, not just even at the county level, in most of sub-Saharan Africa, the actual farmers are women.
Yeah.
The people who are actually working the ground are women. But because some cultures do not really give these women the voice to speak, if me as a journalist, for instance, I wanted to go and interview this female farmer who is working this specific land, acha niulize mzee kwanza. Hapana, mzee amesema umwongeleshe yeye, mimi siwezi kuongelesha. Ongelesha mzee. Yetu ukiuliza mzee hajui shamba ililimwa aje.
Because mama ndo amelima
hiyo shamba. Mzee hajui hata ni mbolea gani iliwekwa kwa shamba, hajui. So you end up getting a very low quality interview because this woman is not allowed to speak to me.
Wow, in closing, Zeynab, as a journalist, how do you see the media coverage of agricultural issues?
I think we are doing well. A couple of years back, you'd barely find any information on agriculture in the newspapers or on the TV or even in the radio. But as the years go by, we actually have an association of science journalists. And in our association of science journalists, we have agriculture journalists, we have environmental journalists. As long as you cover science in the industry, you will find us all in this. There are two associations. There's KENSJA, and then KENSJA, but mostly KENSJA is for environmental journalists only.
Yeah.
And then there's MESHA, which is the one I belong to. KENSJA is Kenya Environmental Journalists Association, KENSJA. And then there's MESHA, which is Media for Environment, Science, Health and Agriculture. So I belong to MESHA myself. So you'll find us all there. And because we are in associations, we are able to judge each other's work. We are able to grow our skills because now we have established we've established ourselves as credible people to talk to, as opposed to if you went and just picked a random journalist as a scientist and tell this journalist, yo, I'm a scientist, I have this research, can you do it? That random journalist you picked doesn't know how to read that data. So over the years, now you can find Food Friday on NTV.
So thank you so much, Zeynab, for your insights, and thank you for tuning in. Hope you tune in again next Friday for more exciting conversations. Follow us on SoundCloud, like and share, and leave us a comment. Subscribe on Apple Podcast, rate and review. If you have any questions, write to us on info@roottofood.org. Bye!